So tonight I'll tell you why they actually had to bail them out, why they're convinced they had to. Of course, it's all lies, but I will tell you the reason they were given. Congress was given for bail us out or else we all go down together. Okay, they have the Samson complex, and that means they don't give a damn if they take the whole world down if they don't get their way. So we'll be discussing that later. Now, this is where it comes from. It comes from a newsletter called The Reaper by R.E. McMaster, the financial newsletter. And after many years, he was able to determine who the Fed's principal owners were. Now, according to McMaster, the top 8 stockholders are, and these are the people who are now taking more of all the public assets that we've built. They're going to have them all. The United States owes them right now. If they paid it off in the whole country of the United States, they would still owe the bankers another USA, okay? So these are the people who are killing most of us on the planet, all right? So the top 8 stockholders are Rothschild Banks of London. Okay, and that means it's a private bank owned by the family. These are families. Forget the word bank. All it means is bench. Bank is the Italian name banco for bench, because in the Middle Ages, if you were in court, you came out of court, the first person you saw was a moneylender sitting on a bench, because he knew you would need him. And he was right there to get each last drop of blood. That's where the word bank comes from. It's a bench where the moneylender sits. So the Rothschild of London and Berlin, they're at the top of the food chain because they're going to be cannibalizing the whole planet. They've already started. So the next bunch, Lazard Banks. Okay. Lazard Brothers. And they have their head office in Paris. Okay. The next group are the Israel Moses Safe Banks, and that is spelled S-E-I-F. I don't know what that means. Bank. Yep. And that's of Italy. You can see they're spread around in various countries so that they have a complete clutch. The Warburg Bank of Hamburg, and Warburg was the one who helped Rothschild push through the Fed, of Hamburg and Amsterdam. It's also this group that had Charles I executed when he was set up saying that he had embezzled money from the crown. So he was executed, helped out by them, and Amsterdam. And of course, the guy who followed their instructions was the religious fanatic Cromwell. And they set the Bank of England up. And then they got rid of Cromwell once he had done what he was supposed to do. The next bank is Lehman Brothers, which supposedly is now defunct, but it was merely just swallowed up. They still have all their money. And if they don't, they'll just print some more. From thin air, where it all comes from. And the next group that own the globe are Kuhn, Leb, and they are of New York, I believe. Let me see. Leb Bank of New York. They're from all over. Basically Europeans. Rothschild was in Frankfurt, one of his first things. Lazard brothers have been in Paris for a long time. And on and on. And they've been around ever since. I mean, Lincoln had to deal with them. They're still here. So, and then Kuhn Leb, and then Chase Manhattan of New York. They're the next bunch. And Salmon Chase he wasn't too bad a person, and the bank, of course, was named for him. But he still was on the side of the people that produce money from thin air. And a familiar bank, Goldman Sachs. And who are they? Goldman Sachs, unfortunately, and one of their little dwarfs is now running the Bank of Canada, the Carney character. He's from Goldman Sachs. Goldman Sachs ruined the state of Montana about 10 years ago. It was on 60 Minutes. They convinced all the people in the state who had all their retirement monies in their own public hydro. For $20 million, they convinced the state to go the other way and get into communications. The stocks dropped to nothing. Everyone in the state lost their retirement funds, every one of them. But these people got $20 million for their advice. He's now running the Bank of Canada. Oh. And the IMF's already praised Harper. Oh, Canada's so far ahead of everyone else. Good for them. So these interests, and this man also says, and he's right, all these families know each other. They amount to about 300 people. They all know each other, and some of them are related. Now, these are the people that are now scooping up even more public assets, and they have schemed and plotted this whole recession, depression, whatever they want to do with it. All of them. There they are. That's who's going to take what little bit of monies and taxes you have left, because they will not give up their reign of this planet. And Rothschild said this once when someone, an early Rothschild, they said, when's the best time to buy? He said, when the blood runs in the streets. And this is what they're about, make no mistake. You are nothing to them but a number, a consumer, an investor. Well, now that we know that, we'll get on to the news and all the other atrocities, and then we'll get back to this. Now, one of these seminars I went to, well, I'll do that after the news. Might be too complicated. Now, here's something I promised to tell you last week, but I didn't get a chance to tell you. So I wrote it on this little card so I wouldn't forget. Monsanto is trying to push a new bill through the American Congress, and guess what it says? It's called the Food Safety Modernization Act. Food Safety Modernization. Now, we all know that modernization means poison. Okay. Bill 571, which will give the government supervision over all farms, even little plots you might grow outside in your backyard. especially if it's organic, okay? Orchards, vineyards will all come under and have to register for inspections, not just certification of being organic, but inspections under the government. And the people in the government, who some of their families own Monsanto, are the ones that are pushing this bill, okay? So, if you want to drop off the grid and grow your own food, which is what a lot of people are thinking of doing, they will find you. You can be fined, you can be stopped growing your own food. Now, I don't know if anyone wants to go on the net and keep track of this bill and what happens to it, but there's quite a likelihood that it's going to pass.
What number is it, 471?
571, as far as I know. I caught this very quickly, very late at night, because you're not going to hear any of this in the day. Anything you need to know will come on the air after 1 a.m. And between 1 and 5 a.m. you might hear it. Oh yeah, they've been doing that for quite a while, buying up the seed companies. That's why in India, Vinanda Shiva, who's very prominent there in the saving of the seeds, didn't allow them to do that, and people started putting away their own seeds right away. So not only because these people base everything on manufactured scarcities. There's no scarcity of anything. First one was of money. Now they're going to have one of water, because they're not going to clean it up. Then there'll be food. Everything will be scarce. So you can look forward to that. Now here's another one of the U.S. Code. Section 1520, Chapter 32 of U.S. Code, Title 50. It says here they can't conduct any experiments on us unless, and this is all inclusive, unless there's any reason, anything to do with security. So in other words, all they have to do is, like they've done for 50 years, they can spray the hell out of us at night with anything they want and just say it's for security. And as long as they say that, that covers everything, and they can do anything they want. They can have the chemtrails still coming down, they can use the HARP, anything they want if it's for security. Sure as hell isn't for ours, so it's for theirs, of course. But they can do that as long as they use that excuse. Now, all of a sudden, I guess you heard Ron Paul's supporters are now being called potential terrorists. Oh, they've already stated it.
They repealed that.
Did they repeal it?
The governor had to retract the statement. It's in Infowars.com.
Which governor had to retract that? Who?
The one in Missouri.
The one in Missouri. Oh, said that, and now apparently he's retracted it? What website is it on?
I think it's Infowars.com.
Oh, it's, what's his name? Alex Jones, Infowars.com. So they've done that. But first of all, they said anyone who talks objects to the Texas corridor, mentions the New World Order, is considered a potential terrorist. So now they've had to take that back. But believe me, they'll keep trying. They take it back. The same as Galloway. There's going to be a big stink over that. And I hope there's enough Canadians with enough backbones left to send into the papers and say how ashamed they are. Imagine keeping him out because he gave humanitarian aid to Gaza. When Finkelstein came here in January, he said, half the people in Gaza are under 15. They killed 350 children. And now, and I have the newspaper piece right here, now they're wearing T-shirts. The IDF, it was in the Metro, they're wearing T-shirts showing a pregnant woman, Arab woman, and she's surrounded by a gun sight. There's a circle around her and the cross. She's in the crosshairs of a gun sight on the T-shirt, and it says under that, 1 shot, 2 kills. And the IDF are wearing them. And they're saying they don't, that the factory was in Haifa, they don't know, or Tel Aviv, whatever. This is what they're wearing now. And they're trying to accuse Galloway of being a terrorist because he gave some humanitarian aid to all these people that were massacred. Massacred in the streets, buildings bombed, cars bombed, children shot for fun. The reason that banks like to lend to governments, silly, traitorous governments who could print their own money any day of the week, and we have bonds. Any country with bonds can print its own money. But they have betrayed us, and they're using these people as middlemen. We don't even need them. So now they own everything. They own the politicians, and the good little politicians do what they're told. That's what they do. So, and of course, Harper announced the IMF is pleased with Canada. Well, who gives a goddamn? Carney's in the Bank of Canada. And Bank of Canada bonds for the last 10 years have been managed by a Texas company. Bank of Canada bonds. They do all this without telling us a bloody thing. We don't know anything. We're just wandering around like not just sheep, but blind sheep. Okay, now the rest of it we're going to go into later because, as I said, I've been to a few seminars and people are not getting the whole truth. These people are well-meaning. I never want that said about me. I never want that on my tombstone. She meant well. I think it's the worst thing you can say about anybody. Because it means you're totally ineffectual. But I'll go into that later. Now, in London, England, and it's not like polite Canada, they're bracing for the anti-banker blitz. As soon as the G20 starts up there, the English people, probably they're going to add the Irish, the Scottish, they're all going to be in the streets. People are so angry. But you see, they're not going to worry too much about that because if we get too angry, there's many things that they can just let drift down on us if we get too angry. The same as they've just announced they're not going to tolerate any violent demonstrations in Britain when the G20 are there. They won't tolerate that. However, the violence they've all done to us over 300 years is okay, but no violent demonstrations. So we don't have to worry about George Orwell. He is spinning in his grave to such an extent he's got another form of energy going. He can't believe it. Now here's an old, out of one of my older files, November 13th, 1993, when they were going to fingerprint all the poor. And we all went, our groups, my group as well, went to City Hall to try and stop it. And Citibank was going to have all the machines that were going to fingerprint and eye print, every kind of print, the poor. So then I gave this to Howard Moscow, he was there then, and he held this up. Canada is tied to a $150 billion bond scam, and in this article, who was leading it? Citibank. And there they were sitting up in the highest rows while all the poor, people like John Clark, were down below, and they were up there. And when Moscow started talking about this, he said, why do we want to deal with these people? Look what they're involved in. And the chairwoman said, shh, sit down, shut up. And they got so angry, but the Citibank people quietly left. There was no more talk about fingerprinting the poor, putting them in alphabetical lists and all this, because I gave Howard this. But anyway, the Citibank was left, nothing happened. The poor actually were not fingerprinted after that. And, oh, now here's three little blurbs together all this week. Now listen to this. This is pathetic. In Metro, they're saying the Pentagon questions China's expanding military power. Well, yes, of course it's expanding. They have a couple of billion they can get rid of, no problem. They can't wait to see them go. Anyway, the G20 is really underneath being called the G2, because now the idea is that the US and China get together. This is how they're going to save the planet. The US and China, and one guy here says, the talk ahead of next week's G20 summit is that only a union of the US and China can get the global economy out of its slump. No. See, what I'm saying is we have to know the difference. This is about finance, not economy. It's not a global economy at all. We're not saving a bloody thing. It's finance. Finance is lending. That's what it is. Only they call it an economy, and everybody uses their jargon. Oh, yeah, save the economy. While the people in Congress knew, the guy that said this bailout is a cow patty with sugar on it, I'm not eating it. But they got their way in the end, because all these people, they have stolen every public asset from every country with their money from thin air, called the fractional reserve, which means what it says. We only have a fraction in reserve of what we lend, period. That's finance. When you have to have faith, it's like a religion. Oh yeah, there's a lot of gold in that vault. Who gives a damn? Water is worth more than gold. Huh. So it's still based on gold, which they hoard. And this is what's going on now. So now, the next thing they're going to put the world through is the US and China. Now, he says here, and he's right, he says, the two powers are now equal. No, they're not. Not equal at all. The thinking goes, they're wrong. Must work together, wrong again. Then he says, there's one problem, it ignores reality. And this other man, who's actually got some brains, David Olive, if you've ever read him, he's been around for years. He's saying the notion of a G2 ignores Chinese instability. Oh, that's a nice word. Instability. They've got just as much unemployment there now. People are all going back to the farms instead of working in sweatshops. The slave labor is going home to the farms to starve there. And the 2 billion can easily be used in a war. Who cares how many we lose? We've got more people than any in the world, so we can afford to lose at least 1 billion. And there in China is where they imprison people who are anti-communist. And as I told you before, corporatism and communism are no different. One is state totalitarianism, the other is corporate totalitarianism. And China now is a combo. They have got the winning combo. With a communist government, people are just slaves again. You're going to capitalize on them, all those little slaves, so that's your side of the capitalism. And in between, anyone who doesn't agree will be put in a prison next to a hospital, and when those organs are needed at $50,000 a pop, they'll be taken from you, not even anesthetized. And whoever needs the eyeballs or the heart, whatever, will be next door. Over it'll go. They make some more thousands. They're making millions on organs. What? The United States is supposed to mingle with this. Oh, the founding fathers, even worse than Orwell, are going like tops, just top spinning, okay? And all because these people, the plantation owners, they're not happy with most of the world's assets. They want them all. And they've told the governments this, and governments will obey. And you know why they will obey. Now here we get to the bad part, where they've convinced the Congress. And why did they do this, and how did they do it? Now, I have an analogy to this. Can't find it here, it doesn't matter. I can remember why they're doing it. They have said to the Congress, and they're quite right, unfortunately, they've said, we are everywhere on the planet now. We own governments. This is what it's like. Say you have woven a piece of cloth, okay? Oh, one's called the warp, one's called the woof, whatever. That's your piece of cloth. That's the planet, okay? So what they've said, and they're quite right, is, have you ever tried to save a piece of cloth when all the way through, whichever way we go through the cloth, we're part of it? You try and get rid of us and the whole cloth will tear to pieces because we're in everything, everywhere. Our threads are everywhere. Try and take a piece of cloth and destroy it without pulling all the other pieces out. When you try and get out just these. That's what they said to the Congress. Watch it. We will pull everything down with us. We don't even have to try. It will come down with us because we are everywhere. And so 2 days later, they realized that. What will we do? Well, simply this. If they had the guts, and we all had the guts, we could start at the top or the bottom, whichever, and say to them, you're just middlemen. You don't build bridges. This is the government. Our resources are here. All we need is a bridge to the people who do all the work. But they have formed a bottleneck right in the middle. We don't need them, but we've got them there. And they are everywhere on the planet. So they simply said, go ahead, see what happens. Yes, the whole planet, financially, not economically, financially, would come to a halt. And so their threat worked. But if we decided to have an economy without involving these parasites, we would, in the beginning, we would have to start all over. We would have to do what Lincoln did. We would have to say, from now on, all countries, and they have the right, all countries will create their own money. Free of interest. New money will, not old money, not money, you don't get rid of banks. However, two things will happen. We will start out from scratch with interest-free money from government, the way Lincoln did it, the way Jackson did it. And banks will still exist. However, what we will do with them is say, you cannot lend more than you have. So, banks would still make a huge profit. They can't lend what they don't have. That means they can't create money. It's like me. If you believe I have $1 million in the bank, and I start paying people with my little IOU, signed Sydney, I signed it, here it's good. If you all believe it's good, you'll accept it. But if something happens and you find out I really don't have anything in there, well, you won't accept it. So all they're saying to the banks is, you can't lend what you don't have. Not even 10 times. Well, now they lend about 500 times what they have. You cannot lend what you don't have. You're still a bank, but you can't do that. And the money, new money, comes out interest-free. It comes out through government. It goes straight to the people who are doing the work, the bridges, the roads, whatever they're doing. There's nothing in between the money and the people. That's what Douglas said. Later on, we'll go into Douglas. Because Douglas was an engineer, he understood. You can take an economy and you can make it around any philosophy you want, fascism, anything you want. Or you can make it fair, and if you're a real engineer, you'll build a bridge, not a bloody bottleneck. That's what economy is about. Saving, not lending. Saving. We've lost everything on the planet. The water's filthy, the air is filthy, the people are dying, they're blaming it on population, another load of crap because they own all the newspapers. There's one tiny group using everything. They're using everything up, and they want to continue to do that. And these people are behind them, and they're behind these people. So we have to realize we either stop, we have to back off from this, we have to cut up our bloody credit cards, number one, and start recycling stuff. Why do you have to buy new clothes? Go to somewhere where you can get, just don't go to these people anymore. They own the bloody world now. So the two rules that Lincoln wanted to do, new money that comes out with interest on it is a crime against humanity. It hasn't done anything. It's new money. It has not performed any services. That's why it's illegal and inhumane to put interest on new money. So this is about finance. Saving the planet is about saving our real assets, and they know what they are. You've got one of these sheets down here. Please put them home, put them in a book. Look, the wealth of nations, they even have said themselves, they've got a list here. They judge the wealth of a nation by its resources and the education of its people. They know what's real and what isn't. This scam, how dare they ask us for money to prop them up when they've done it purposely? They know they're devaluing all the money. The more they print, the more it's devalued. Simple. Because nothing's backing it. Nothing. And even if gold backed it, it wouldn't make any difference. What good is gold? If I have the only freshwater lake and some guy drives up with a big semi full of gold bricks and says, here, I'll own your lake, you can have this. Oh, please, get out. It's nonsense. Stupid. Won't work. So we want to get rid of this bottleneck and get into a real economy. And that's why they still were bailed out, because they made everybody so fearful. If you start unraveling these threads, the whole world will be destitute. But you know what? It won't. Because there's one thing, and John Hodson said this, and he was right. A country can't go bankrupt. You can, and they'll come and take your furniture, whatever. But a country cannot. A country, as long as it has people, and even some mud, and some water, and they have to build houses, adobe, like they do in Mexico, a country can't go bankrupt as long as its people can make things and grow things. That's more nonsense taught by those killers. They're killers. I wouldn't, and people who talk about, oh, the Illuminati, this, what's illuminated about them? They're psychopaths. There's nothing illuminating or illuminated about them. They are simply thieves and killers. And that's what they do best. So they've threatened all the governments. The other ones, they got them in their pocket. People like Harper. The politicians that do what they're told. So that's what we're in the middle of now. So let's keep an eye on the anti-banker blitz. Watch it while it's going on. See if you can get news off the net if you can't get it off the news. Because you won't see a lot of it, especially if it gets nasty. And of course, Galloway couldn't come in. So as I said, I'm ashamed to be Canadian. So much for free speech, and people in different papers said that. This was entirely uncalled for. However, now we have to start connecting dots, okay? There is a very deep connection between these banks, Gaza, the politicians, what they're telling us. This is where the power is coming down from. And as I said, a guy from Goldman Sachs runs our publicly owned bank. And the IMF approves of us. Well, goody, goody. So the war in Afghanistan is still going on. It's not a war. It's a corporate invasion. We're under a corporate totalitarian system. They are corporate invasions to get resources. Africa is a very rich country. The people are all starving and dying, and they don't have a nickel between them. But it's a very rich country. So when it's rich, it's robbed. And as Richard Gwynn says here, he says here, unchecked, unregulated greed breeds corruption. Well, I have news for him. He's saying, remember the well-known political truism that all power corrupts and that absolute power corrupts absolutely. I can add a new one to that. Sorry, it's really far past that. Nowadays, the littlest bit of power can corrupt absolutely. It doesn't take even a lot of power, a smidgen of power from some lowly bureaucrat that makes you stand in line for 2 hours simply for his own amusement. A tiny bit of power will absolutely corrupt. We're way past the days when you need absolute power. And this one here, oh, and it says right here, I don't know who Billy Bob Guthrie is, I haven't a clue, outreach. And he's got this little phrase here, that's because our fractional reserve banking system is unsustainable and will collapse without endless economic growth. No, not economic growth. Without endless loans. That's all. Endless loans that give them even more power. Nothing, please, you've got to divorce economy from loans and finance. So even columnists cannot divorce those two things. Until you can divorce them, you won't understand what is happening to you. Then here he is, Mark Carney, right here. Doesn't he look like a smooth number? Now, the Canada Governor, Mark Carney of the bank, it says now, the former Goldman Sachs executive, there we have it, is widely expected to cut short-term interest rates another 0.5 point, blah, blah, to bring the central bank's overnight rate to a barely noticeable whatever. 7th time Carney has cut interest rates. See, all they can do is raise rates, lower rates, raise rates. They cannot do really anything that's going to help an economy. They only have one tool, that's the hammer. And so this guy from Goldman Sachs is no better than the other idiots. And what have I got here circled? So now one guy here thinks, instead of basing a new international currency, they want that too. You know who's going to own that, okay? International currency on debt or gold, it should be based on, and I've got here, on all the resources that we have. If our money, this guy came on Tuesday from McGill, supposedly to talk about economics. I sat there were about 40 people there, and he was describing nothing to do with economics. You know what he was talking about? He was talking about this wonderful group that's going to be above all the countries, okay? And they're going to decide how much of the resources we can use. This was this guy from McGill. So he never once went into economics of any kind. At the end, he wouldn't answer my hand. I don't know, maybe he knows me. I don't have a clue. But anyway, somebody forced him to. She's had her hand up for half an hour. Why don't you answer her? So I said, well, I can tell you how to save the planet. You simply base your dollar on all the resources, the people, the rivers, the mines, everything that's valuable, that's for survival. You base it on that, the forests. Your dollar is based on that. If your dollar is based on that, you will have to take care of all your resources. You will have to clean your water. You will have to plant more forests, not just tree farms. Forests. You will have to clean up the air. You will have to take care of the people who work in the mines, do the mines so that cyanide doesn't go into all the rivers. You will have to do all that. And in doing that, you will save your economy, your dollar. You will save your resources, your planet. Well, I went up to him after, he let that go. I went up to him after, he said, I agree with you. I said, well, why the hell didn't you say that? No, it's about, he had a book he wrote as well. It's about tenure. And he doesn't want to be thrown off the campus like so many other people. But it is so simple. You use your resources, including the people's intellectual and labor. And Douglas said that. In a later class, I'm going to do Douglas for you, because in 1932, the whole world understood Douglas. And the Congress almost passed his bill, 160 to 40, to do this kind of thing. They stopped that too. These same parasites were there from 1913 onwards. They decided to kill democracy, to kill everything, and now they're killing the whole planet. They're still at it. Where whatever you do to them, Lincoln, Jackson, they will still crawl out from under their rock, and they will proceed again to keep at it. So this guy, Thomas Walkham, he's all right. He said something, of course, I disagree with because it isn't true. He's saying, when a central bank starts lending its own government large amounts of newly minted cash, it's sitting perilously close to what economists call monetizing the debt. Now, the thing is, he says, this is paying for public spending by printing money. But that's exactly what the Bank of Canada did. From 38 onward, right up to 74. However, all that money went into infrastructure, healthcare, bridges, roads, schools, everything. And it was issued at no interest. We have a different bank than the US. We have a publicly owned bank where the charter says, and I've got the charter down there, the page somewhere's in there. The charter says this bank can lend to the government for all infrastructure at no interest. Do you know our debt, before 1974, our debt was flatline. Because of that, we had virtually no debt. And we had all the health care we needed, we had good schools, we had good roads, everything worked. 41 years until Chrétien, 41 years until he started. This is what he did. There's our bank here. We've got all our loans coming out of this bank at 1% or nothing. And even at 1%, the money went back to us. We were the shareholders. We couldn't lose, and it still says that. What did he do? He went and one by one, incrementally, so nobody would notice, he took the loans that were in our own bank at no interest, and he handed them over to these. Now our debt is over 600 billion. And how much of our debt is interest? 95% is compound interest. The original debt was 5%. And every year we pay interest upon interest. That becomes our deficit. That's why they tell us we cannot afford to have our own infrastructure. It's got to be done by private people now. So those same people that are screwing us out of using our own bank are buying up our infrastructure at pennies. Pennies. The same ones. If you don't know these facts, you will not understand what is happening on the planet. And he did that, Chrétien. And because Desmarais, who never lets his face be seen, has always been a Rothschild agent, and because Chrétien's daughter is married to his son, it's all very cozy. But this is what they want, and they've been given it by the United States. He did it under Trudeau, 74. He didn't do it nothing was enacted. Our bank charter is exactly the same as it was in 38. Only they're waiting for the right time to go behind doors and do something to that charter. Okay? In fact, some people are saying, but they can't prove it, and I haven't seen a paper, that when we got NAFTA, one of the conditions in NAFTA was that we not use our own bank. But I have not found a paper yet that backs that up. So I'm not sure what they did then. The point is, whatever they did, it was without a referendum. It had nothing to do with us, and we're the shareholders of the bank. So here, now they're pushing, of course, they want the Amero. They want the Amero here, and they want the big highway. They've told the people in Texas, okay, we're not going to do it, because they came out with guns. Guns! This was like a year ago. We never saw any of it on the news, but there were huge amounts of people in the street with the guns because their property was being taken, eminent domain. Oh, we need it for the highway. Oop. Here it goes, part of your ranch, your farm, whatever. They came out with guns. So what they did in Texas was, they said, okay, we're not doing it. However, they've changed the names they've cut it up in bits and changed the name of each road. Meanwhile, it is continuing behind the people's back. It doesn't matter what we say. Somebody asked me that last year. What's going to be the difference when Obama gets in? I said, Obama, Osama, same agenda, okay? Just forget it. He's going to do a few little things, but if he dares step over the line, he's going to meet with a happy accident. And you have to remember this, they've got the US by the short and curlies because he's a black president. Now, the good thing about that is, and you'll realize every time the US is about to do something horrible, they pick a black front man, Colin Powell. So now with Obama in, no matter how bad things get, people are going to have sympathy for him. And the black people are not going to riot, no matter how bad things get for them, because they're basically most of the poor. They're not going to riot because they've got Obama. He's a good guy, and he's a great front man for something horrible. However, if he dares step over the line even a little bit, and he meets with a happy accident, what will happen then? The states will still lose because they'll have another civil war. Every city will riot, more so than for any other president who's ever been assassinated. And so these people have got the US in a bind. And Obama is the ideal front man to screw everybody, okay? Now, I thought this was funny. Here they're saying here, the banks are saying, March is Fraud Prevention Month. March is Fraud Prevention Month, according to the banks. And Canadians are encouraged to become more aware of the dangers of fraud. To recognize it, all of that. And to help them, they're going to be chipping, microchipping, and PIN technology, and chip. Why is the chip card better? They're better because they electronically, you're going to be using both the card and the chip, validating both the card and the card holder using a PIN. Chip and PIN is the next evolution of electronic payments in Canada. Payments, not benefits. Understand what they're saying. It's all about payments, okay? They don't even use the word receiving. Okay, that's not in here. Not in their dictionary whatsoever. So as fraud continues to evolve, ta-da, you're going to be sucked into this Orwellian pit, all right? And now Wacom says again, political economy, he says right here, now he's a nice guy, but as usual, he hasn't got to the nitty-gritty. So he says, in the Middle Ages, kings seeking ready cash would resort to clipping the coinage. No, it wasn't the kings that did that. It was the ordinary people, okay, and the goldsmiths. They chipped the coins until they could make more coins. The monarch didn't have to. They had all the money. They put the money out at no interest. That's another reason why we have revolutions and all that kind of thing, because the monarch is the competition for these. He always had the right to issue money as much as he wanted. They didn't like that, okay? So now Thomas Wacom says, today, cash-strapped governments need not go to that extreme. They can just print money. Now, what he doesn't realize is, he's basing it on this. This is the lie. Governments have always had the right to print money, not just for what they're building, but for the society's infrastructures. Always they've had the right. So Thomas is okay sometimes, but he really lost the ball on that one. There is nothing wrong with the government printing its own money. That's what they should be doing. But they're not, because they haven't got the parts. They haven't got, they just haven't got it to come up against these. These people are murderers, assassins, 6 presidents, all done by the people involved with the Federal Reserve. They're murderers and thieves. And everybody knows they will do that. And so everybody in governments listens to them. Arnie, what? He went over to see Rothschild before he became governor of California. Landed on the helicopter, on the lawn, all that business. Give me a break. And who else? Who else, when Palestine was given away, when the British thanked the Arabs for helping them win against the Turks with Lawrence, and they said, you'll have your independence now, Palestine will, we're giving you that for helping us. Wasn't a freebie. What happened? Within a couple of years, because Rothschild is a dyed-in-the-wool Zionist, he tells the government, hey, you owe me big time. But they didn't have to borrow his money. They're so stupid. You don't have to borrow these people's money. It's nonsense. So he said, okay, now, you owe me big time. I want Palestine. So they reneged on their promise to the Arabs. They wrote him a letter. You've all seen it. It's common knowledge. Oh, yes, here, it's all yours. Whenever has this ever happened on the planet? That one country had the right to give away another country to a family? It's yours, buddy. Do what you want with it. When did this ever happen before? When will it ever happen again? Never. Why did it happen? Because. And why does nobody ever help the people in Palestine after 60 years of massacre? Why does not one country have the guts to do anything about it, or even all together? I will tell you why. Here's the piece of cloth again. Their loans could get called in. Their loans. Every country's loans could get called in. Pay me now, or go bankrupt. And that's why Palestinians will be there until the last one of them is dead, down to the last child. It's this financial grip on the globe. It runs everything. And here we are now in the middle of the biggest depression they've caused yet. And even if it eases off a bit, it's going to be going on for decades. Why? Because we need lots of poor people for those wars. Lots of surplus labor for those wars we're going to be having. You will not get this class at this school, okay? I can tell you that because I'm a graduate. But you will never get an economics class here that is about economics. You will only get an economics class with books like doorstops, and you will only learn the jargon of the financial scheme. That's all you will learn here. Does everyone know what the deficit is? Who doesn't? If you don't, I will explain. Don't be ashamed. Lots of people don't have a clue. The deficit is not the debt, okay? That's different. So, the deficit, when they, oh here I can wipe this off now. When the government gathers all the taxes together, and then they realize that even with all the taxes we're paying, they don't have enough to do everything they want to do. Might be missing a few hospitals, maybe a few roads, sewers, things like that that people need. So, the deficit is when, now get this, the deficit is, here's the taxes, all right, they're all piled up here, goody. Over here is what they need for the infrastructure, and they add up all the taxes, oops, few billion short. What do? Borrow. We borrow, and that becomes the deficit. Any difference between the taxes you collect for the year and what you need to spend them on is the deficit. Now, when we used our own bank, it was okay to run a deficit. Because when we went to our own bank for that gap there to fill it up, we didn't pay any interest. We owned the bank, you and me. Now what do? We ignore the charter completely. And where are we going? Where are we going to borrow the money to fill that gap there? Oh, we're going to them. Who did that? Our governments, several of them. After Chrétien. So now, what happens? This $600 billion debt, which is compounding as I speak. It will never stop compounding as I speak. So no one ever says, pay off the debt. Impossible. Mathematically impossible. They will tell you that. So what do they say? They say we have to pay down the debt. Down. But if it's compounding, and it keeps on compounding as you're trying to pay it down, of course you can never pay off the debt. Mathematically impossible. Doesn't even have to be space math, Euclidean math, nothing. Just like grade 5. Oops, 600, running up interest all the time. We'll pay it down this year, and then as we're paying it down, it's going up on the other end. Wonderful, that's a great economy, isn't it? Why? Because it's hooked in to this fraud here. So aside from everything else, the bailing outs and all of that, and AIG got 170 billion, they still got their bonuses. Oh, the people, so what is the guy with the car company, 23 million he left with? They're doing such a good job. You see what I'm saying? No wonder people, oh, no, thin air, my dear, thin air. But the thing is, we pay interest on all of that. We're going to pay interest on his little reward. We're going to pay interest on borrowing from these people for our deficit, for our infrastructure. And the 700 billion bailout becomes 2 trillion when we pay the interest. We're paying the interest on the bailouts for these crooks. And you wonder why people in London, they have a little more open society than we do. I mean, in the 40s, everything I'm telling you now was common knowledge. People were taught this. They knew this. Now, they know nothing. It's really, truly like the sheep. That's why on this essay that I've done, you can't see it, it's called The Illusion of Freedom. There are sheep there lined up at a closed door. We only have an illusion of freedom. That's what they've given us. We are not free. Everyone is a slave now. Everybody. Of debt. Debt is the biggest killer on the planet. 32,000 kids die every day because their countries are not allowed to grow the food they used to grow. They have to grow crops for the IMF. They export them, they pay the IMF back for the loan, their kids die. That's what these people are. That's why in certain periods of history in the Middle Ages, if you dealt in interest to this extent, you could not be buried in sacred ground. If you were supposedly a Christian, you could not be buried in sacred ground because you were dealing in death. Debt is death. It causes death. In the U.S., rich people will live longer. They can afford the operation or whatever it is. The poor person knows, I will not live that long. So these people are controlling everything. So now to get back to the deficit, then the deficit eventually goes right back into the debt, whatever's left over. If you think we can pay it off every year, forget it. Forget it. Goes back in there. In 74, our debt was flatline. Now it's over 600 billion. Simply because they're not allowing us to use our own bank. See, we're not like the Federal Reserve. Now, another seminar, and of course the borrowing from our bank would have been fine. We wouldn't have had a big deficit, but because we borrow from private people. Now the second thing I heard at this seminar, I think Friday it was, is somebody there made the remark, I forget, it was so astonishing I almost fell under the chair, and said, oh, Canada doesn't have a fractional reserve. Excuse me, why are we in debt then? Of course we do. They are borrowing from people who don't have really anything. We're borrowing and paying them. Of course we're using a fractional reserve here. The same system as they use in the US. If we were still using our bank, we wouldn't be. I can't believe it. So what they did was they got the fractional reserve system mixed up with the statutory reserve, okay? So now I have to explain what they are. The fractional reserve is lending out money you don't have, period. That's what it is. The statutory reserve is what the state still has and we don't. We did have it until about 93. Now, a statutory reserve means that these private banks, like the TD, the whatever our banks are, the chartered ones, every year for decades, to keep them from going mad with speculation, the government said to these chartered banks, you have to leave with the Bank of Canada, you have to give us a 3% reserve, and you have to give it to us, and it goes into the Bank of Canada to keep reins on you before you turn the big casino into a complete mess, which they've done. That was the statutory reserve, meaning it's something the chartered banks have to put into the Bank of Canada for safekeeping. to stop them from going hog wild. This is what they did. Now that's a statutory reserve. The state still has it, probably about this size by now. They still have it. They didn't get rid of it. But what happened in '93? Our banks here made a lot of crummy deals in Mexico, and they were really behind the 8 ball. So they come to the government, and listen, this is what they do. Listen to how they work things now. They are so devious. They are deviants anyway, but they're devious. So they come to the government and they say, wait a minute, we aren't getting any interest on that 3% we've put into this bank, your bank. Therefore, you should give it back to us. Now, if you made a loan with a bank and you got their money, you'd have to leave them collateral, am I right? Of something. Well, this really is collateral to make sure these people don't go nuts. So when they said, well, we're not getting any interest on that, so give it to us. Excuse me, if I leave collateral with a bank, do they pay me interest on it? No. It's collateral, they need it, or I won't get their money. But they convinced the government, I don't know how, over some nice dinners, who knows, Martin especially, he's prone to that. So they convinced them, and they took that 3% reserve out of the Bank of Canada, gave it back to the private banks here, who made the big foul-ups in Mexico. Could you work that with your bank? Oops, went on a trip, spent my money. Can you give me the interest on my collateral here? Please. Anyway, they do not use honest bookkeeping. The government and the banks collude in crooked bookkeeping. So now that's what happened to the statutory reserve we had in the Bank of Canada. We don't have it anymore. The fractional reserve is when you lend what you don't have. When you lend, as they do now, 400 times what you have or may not have in the vault, okay? That's where we are now. And we're bailing these people out. And they're going, for that bailout, they are going to put the screws to us to such an extent you have no idea. You have no idea what's coming along the pike. So, that is the fractional reserve. Now, if you still don't understand what a fractional reserve is, I will tell it to you simply. And I've told this story before. The Goldsmith story explains the fractional reserve. But before I get to that, now that I've just mentioned Martin, and I'm talking about bookkeeping, and I can back it up with everything I have here. Remember the year he wanted to get elected? He said he balanced the budget. I balanced the budget. You've got my article on it down here. It's a back-to-back, oh God, it's from '98. Which one? Oh, here it is here. It's this one here with this very dramatic picture of me. Anyway, it goes into the whole thing with Martin. Now let me tell you what he did, and then we'll do the fractional reserve. Does everyone get this now, what a statutory reserve is? The other night in the seminar I went to, there were people there that said, this reserve is the same as that. The statutory reserve is the same as a fractional reserve. No, no, please. So I have to come every Friday just to keep an eye on what they say there. I know it's quite maddening, but I may have to do it, okay? Because I can't stand people being confused. Anyway, this is what Martin did. The year he said he balanced the books. This is an example of crooked bookkeeping, okay? Now, if you build a bridge or whatever it is you build, normally regular accounting, honest accounting, when you build that bridge and say it costs $50 million, what you do every year, you depreciate that bridge or whatever else it is. What am I doing? You depreciate the bridge by, say, $1 million a year until in 50 years you either renovate or rebuild the bridge. Now that's normal accounting. That is, if you're a chartered accountant, this is what you do. However, for the last 50 years at least, in our government and probably many others, after you build this bridge, and this bridge is an investment just like a school would be, when you build this bridge, this is what they've been doing. Okay, here's the books, the government books, bridge. And it's supposed to be, it's an asset. Yes, it is, under the assets. However, the bridge is listed at $1. Oh, that's my investment. $1 on the government books, okay? Now, what happens to the other $49,999,999? Where do they put that? Oh, that's an expense and goes into the deficit. What? Excuse me? No, it's not an expense, it's an investment. Should be depreciated each year as an investment. No, they don't do that. Listed at $1. If Martin sold the St. Lawrence Seaway, he could say he made $999 on it. It's listed as $1. So it's listed at $1. The other 49 million goes into the deficit, and they did it in Reaganomics. Why? Why would they do such a crooked thing? And they told us. They said because the bigger the deficit is, the more social programs we can cut. Deficit's big, you can't have this, that. Nobody questions how they got the bloody deficit. However, when Martin came along and he wanted to be elected and he wanted to look like he knew what he was doing, okay, there were thousands of assets in that deficit that were really assets. All he did was he took them out of the deficit and he put them right back on the side of the books at their real value, all of them balanced. Look at me. I did it. For the first time in his life and a few others, he did the honest thing and he moved the expenses out of the deficit, the assets that they call expenses, over to the assets side, and lo and behold, he had lowered the deficit like you wouldn't believe. He simply followed honest accounting procedure. Everyone knew what he did. As soon as persons hear about economists, oh, their eyes glaze over. Oh, leave it to them. Oh, that's what they want. No, it can't be left to them. So the fractional reserve, now that you know what Martin did, the fractional reserve is exactly this, okay? How they got to lend out money from thin air that they don't have, that we are paying our real assets. They're grabbing all our real assets with this phony paper. That is the whole idea behind it. They are getting all the assets on this planet for paper with numbers on it that they make up from thin air and has nothing to back it except, now this is how the game works. The more of your wealth, the more of your actual assets they have. Do you see how the game goes? They will run you from that. Finally, they'll be able to say, yeah, but we do own everything on the planet. We can have the dollars we want. You'll be on our electronic system because we own all your stuff. Because you were stupid enough to let us do this to you. And that's another reason why they look down on all you people. They are laughing at everybody that they've been able to screw over like this. What a scam. They're killing themselves laughing. They do laugh all the way to the bank. They're taking your real stuff. whole countries. That's why people in London and Europe, they were educated a little better than we were. They are exactly aware of what's going on. And as Rothschild said, at some point there will be blood in the streets. Yes, there will. Everything you own will be taken away. Not in the sense they're going to come and get it, but they can devalue the money, the property, anytime they want. You can have your life savings brought down to this because they run the scheme. Now, let's explain what the scheme is. I'll start in the 11th century, although it went on past Caesar and before Caesar, but I'm going to start in the Middle Ages, before the Industrial Age. In the village or the town, there was always a goldsmith. He had the vault. He dealt in coins, ornaments. He dealt with the wealthy people of the town. Now, at some point, the poor, who were always lusting after luxuries like food, would rob some of these people, and they would go to the goldsmith and they'd say, look, we will pay you if you will take our gold coins in your safe, leave them there. When we want them, we'll come and get them. And every time we do a transaction with you, we will pay you. And the goldsmith thought, well, that's a good deal. I don't have to do anything except let them use my safe. So it started up, and the people of the village, if somebody wanted to buy a new coach or a new house, they would go out to the goldsmith and they would have their receipts. They would hand him over their coins, or they'd bring the receipt and get some coins out of their bag. So what the goldsmith was doing when he started out, he had the safe, that's the storage. He had all the little bags belonging to people of coins, and he was making money on every transaction, when they got it, when they put it in, whatever. So he was then banking. He was a goldsmith banker. And sometimes if they wanted to go to France or whatever from England, they didn't want to carry the coins, he would get in touch with another goldsmith he knew over there, and the little guy in his village would bring him, say, 50 coins, give them to him. He had them, and he would give the guy a little note saying, so-and-so paid me 50 gold coins, please reimburse. When he got to France, this guy's, the one who worked with him, would give him back the 50, minus, of course, his charge for doing it. So people were even transporting gold by letters of credit back then. And the goldsmith, they had a whole network all over Europe. They all worked together. Okay, that was great. That was handy. We still do it today. And the goldsmith was now a banker. Well and good. Now, at some point, the person in the village who was buying and doing things in the village, he got tired of going all the way to the banker. Maybe it was a coach ride a few miles away. He didn't want to go. So what he started doing, the person, the customers, say, in the village, would say to the man he's buying the coach from, okay, look, I'm going to write you a receipt. I'll say pay to, I'll put your name in here, pay to, I'll sign it. You go to the goldsmith, will you, and get the money out. Here's my receipt. I owe you 20 gold pieces, off you go. So the person he bought the carriage from, he went to the goldsmith, got the coins out, went off happy. Now after a while, this took a while, the creditor who would sell him the carriage or whatever, he got tired of going to the goldsmith too. It was too far, didn't want to do that, he needed the money for other things. So the guy who sold the carriage would buy something else, and he'd do a little checkout, put his name, sign his name to the bearer on demand, okay, whatever. He'd say, look, you go. So after a while, and this is important, people, instead of going to the goldsmith, maybe 2 guys in a year, would pass their receipts back and forth. They all knew what they had in the vault. They knew exactly what was in their bag in the vault. And they were passing these things back and forth. And they trusted each other and they trusted the banker. He had worked up their trust. So this is what was happening. Now, a little while after this, the goldsmith banker realizes something. He's only having a few people come, and he knows the receipts are going back and forth. He thinks, you know what? And he says to his wife, she pays no attention, she's asleep. He's saying, only 2 people have actually come to me in the 6 months to get out their actual coins. People are passing back their receipts back and forth instead of coming here. So he said, he couldn't even sleep all night. This idea took hold of him. So he got up in the morning, he went to his desk, took out his little receipt book, and he drew up maybe a dozen receipts, signing them with his name. Had a stiff drink first. One thing he did not do, after he filled out about a dozen receipts, and he said, now I'm going to spend these. I need this, that, and the other. I'm going to go out and spend them. One thing he did not do was take any of his gold to the vault. Now you have to remember how important, he was a banker at this point. He was just taking deposits. He was making money on transactions. However, when he wrote his checks out, he didn't take his little bag of coins and put them back in the vault here with everyone else's. No. Why didn't he? Because they trusted him. They trusted him. They believed he had the same coins in the bank that were on his receipts like everyone else had. They trusted him, built up over the years. Naturally, they're going to accept his receipts, which they did. So soon, he had a bigger home. He became a pillar of the community. He was looked up to, respected all over. And still, no one knew that his receipts were devaluing every receipt they had. As he put out his receipts every year with nothing in that vault, their receipts were going down, down. Hello? Down, down. So, he wasn't just a banker anymore. He was creating money. He was not transacting it. He was not using his own. He was creating money, and only the monarch had the right to create money. There was no gold backing his, nothing. So he was creating money illegally. It was counterfeit money, nothing behind it. And so he kept doing this and got even wealthier. So the goldsmith, having gone from being a banker to creating money, and got away with it. He owned half of Europe. The whole network was doing the same thing. All these people, they go way back. They were all doing the same thing. And when they foreclosed on all kinds of people who couldn't keep paying their interest, they took the properties. Come on, that's how it started. And kings and queens were in debt to them. People in the royal peerage were in debt. Lose money at gambling, borrow from the money changer. Oh, God. Everything was gone then. They were poor forever. Okay, now, so they own half of Europe already. They're all doing this. Now comes the second and worst part of the scam. He says to himself one night, we'll get back to the single guy now. His wife's asleep again, couldn't care less. He's saying, my God, look, I've spent all this, these receipts. We've got a bigger house. We've got maids. I'm in this group and that group. Oh, I love it. He says, you know what? I've been able to spend all this money with no gold backing it into circulation. You know what? Since I can spend all this money that's not backed, I'm going to lend it all too. I'm going to lend this money. And off he went, and there they are. Fractional reserve. We're lending the whole world now money we don't have. We never had it, but by God, we're going to get everything you own with this scheme. You think they're not going to be angry in London? They know this. Many, many people in Europe know what you don't. They know where these people got their money. And I hope those people in London give it hell, because we are doing nothing here. Ooh, you want my money? Ooh, I have to leave my home. Ooh, I can't pay my mortgage anymore. Oh, must be my fault. Must be true what they're telling me. I've spent too much. I've lived beyond my means. I'm living beyond my means. Do they ever say that these people are living way beyond their loans? That the banks are going way beyond their loans? No. Debt is death. It's death to most of the globe. They will lose all the assets they worked for. So Obama ain't gonna do nothing. He cannot. He has a choice. You do a few little things that look good around the edges, but do not touch our plan. And he knows that. And no one's ever going to talk about it. And so, as I said, the militias in the US, they all know this history. They all know monetary history. They know what Jackson did. They know what Lincoln did. He got rid of these parasites. Lincoln said to them, I don't need your money. I will create my own money. Paid for the war, the North won. He simply said, I will create my own money. Jackson took all the money out of the central bank, which was owned by these people, even back that far, took all the money out, put it in all the state banks, which were not run by these people. It says on his tombstone, I killed the banks. But then he got 2 terms and they wanted to bring him back for a 3rd term. So now they have nobody like that. And these people tell the Congress what to do. Yes, they do. So what we're talking about here, and you have to connect the dots, why nobody will ever help Palestine. They will call in the loans on whatever country dares to go in there or say anything different. Been going on for 60 years. So if you don't think that these crooks aren't running things, think again. You go behind any of the large corporations, they have to go to these people. If they want a loan, they have to go to those people. They run the stock market. Your average guy hasn't got a hope in hell. You're lucky after a lifetime if you even out. It's not meant for you. The insiders do that, and they fleece everybody that's sucked into it. They fleece everybody. They can bring on a depression whenever they want, a recession, a war. They're going to make us so miserable with this next recession that most people will be glad to go to war. Just like I read in the paper the other day, a guy has a little kid, a wife, he just lost his job. He's now going to apply to the army. Do you see what I'm saying? These people should be taken off the planet by someone who really wants us to survive and moved somewhere so they can all kill each other off. Because that's what they do. They're psychopaths. And they're running things now and they want more wars. So they need people brought down, frustrated, desperate. I'll do anything. I have to eat. So the food will be scarce, the water will be scarce, so everything will be privatized. You see what I'm saying? That is what they want in the end. And whatever life you have, whatever you own, if they decide you're not going to own that anymore, You will not own it. They make the laws. The law of forfeiture. At some point in this class, we will be discussing the law of forfeiture. How they can take away everything you own without even charging you with anything. It's done 50,000 times every year in the United States, every year. Law of forfeiture. If you're a dissenter, they will get you whatever way they have arranged to get you, by law. This robbery has been made legal. All the other bad laws, they're legal. This is what's happening. That's why, if you had any advice to give at the beginning of the country, you should have said to everybody, have a lawyer in every family. Have a lawyer in every family that knows every change of law and statute, so that when they come to get rid of everything you own, you might be able to fight them. But only if you're in on making the laws. This is what's going on. And let me see, I don't want to forget these last, because we're going to be going into this. We've done the difference. Let me see now. Now, this is what they've done. This is the latest. This is how it works with China. You might as well know now. Part of the banking thing is the NAFTA and the highway and all of that. So this is what they did to this country and the US. They sent all the manufacturing jobs overseas, okay? Overseas. Most of it to China, okay? Especially in the States. They paid China with American dollars. Now, American dollars, as you know, are debt. All the American dollars don't come out without interest. They come out with interest. That means the Chinese, who are holding all the American dollars, are holding the US debt. Okay? Now that the value of the money is going down and things are hitting the skids in the States, what's going on now? The Chinese are coming back to the US and they're buying up all the foreclosed properties. What a smart thing for the US government to do, wasn't it? They're back now with American money, buying up all the properties that are gone down, and more than that. So for every slave, because they're based on slave labor, the slave labor is why the jobs went overseas, and for every one slave that's made, there are 10 more over here. This is what they've done. These people have done that to America. It was planned. And if it's done to America, it's done to us. And guess who the first tenants in the new World Trade Tower in New York are going to be? The first tenants, all Chinese. They are buying up with the devalued money they got for all their cheap crap, mostly contaminated, that came over here, and all these poor, sick people with no jobs, and everybody this hefty, because they eat crappy chemical food, went into the Walmarts and whatever, sent all the money, no jobs for their kids, all the money went over here. They're coming back and they're buying up all the cheap properties now. Great idea, wasn't it? And these people are back of it. Are back of it. That's not an economy, I'm sorry. It's slave labor and it's finance. No economy involved. Everything's being ruined, poisoned, destroyed on the planet. Nothing is being saved. There's no economy. This planet is being destroyed basically by this scheme. Yes. Destroyed by that scheme. Everything's being poisoned. We won't even have water soon. I mean, I went to Maud Barlow's thing. The water, it's the scarcity of water because it's undrinkable. But that's okay, because as long as we keep making, as long as the GDP has nothing to do with the wealth that we own. It's all about transactions, all of it. It's another lie. Oh, we have a big GDP. Yeah, but it's a big GDP. If you spill an oil tanker for 50 miles, that goes into the GDP. All the toxic cleanup is GDP. It's got nothing to do with what we actually own. It's just financial transactions. The point is, we must learn what a real economy is and what a financial lending scheme is. They are not the same. They just call it the economy, so you'll believe it is. Oh, the economy this, the economy that. You haven't got a goddamn clue. Everything's poisoned. People are dying. People are sick. And you're calling this an economy? Economy means save. It's always meant save. Does not mean usury. Does not mean keeping the bankers in the fat of the land. That's not what it means. It doesn't mean war. No. But all that comes out of that scheme. All of it. I don't know if anyone ever heard of Major Douglas, but I will be teaching Major Douglas's formula in one of these lectures down the road here, where he explains what we should do to have a real economy. This is not it. They know they're killing everyone on the planet. They're aware of that. They sit there and laugh about it. And they think they're superior to everyone on the planet because they've been able to put this over on us. They have a good reason to think that. And now they're so intimidating. In one of these classes, I will go through the history of America and how many presidents were assassinated by these people. Every president who talked about the government printing its own money was bumped off by these people. McKinley, Jackson, they shot at him twice. Then there was Lincoln. Then there was, what's the other guy? Garfield. Then Kennedy especially. You have a paper down there with all the extra money that Kennedy put out that just said United States dollars. Here it is. I got this from a guy in Utah who sent me these papers, a lot of papers years ago, from the Treasury in Utah, giving the exact amount that Kennedy put out. And as soon as they got rid of him, they called it all back in. $4 billion and some odd he put out. Lincoln did $450 million. $450 million of greenbacks. As soon as he said, if I'm reelected, I'll keep printing our own money at no interest, gone. Every president who ever said it in his inaugural address, gone. Within months, sometimes weeks, of saying that. So the whole world is terrified of these people. No, these people can take out whole countries. We will bankrupt you. We will have your people starving in the streets. They can do it because nobody's yet said to them, I don't want this scheme. No, I'm not going to be bankrupt. I have kids, we're going to build our own houses, we're not going to borrow anything, we'll get along, we'll grow our own food. Now that's why that law by Monsanto's trying to come through. They do not want people getting off the grid. They do not want anyone opting out of this. We have a bunch of criminals who now have enough power to actually kill presidents and bankrupt countries if we believe that we are bankrupt. But we don't have to believe that. So thank you. That's it for tonight. I'm sure that's enough to go on.